Chapter 81 Taking the Longing Due, the Ability to Advance Again. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It's not that I want to leave, Hanli said casually, but this place is truly blessed. If it weren't so far from Wuhuan City, I'd want to stay longer. Du Guyen smoothed her hair, nodding in agreement. Totally. The environment's great for cultivating, but it's too isolated. Not exactly convenient, you know. Alright, get some rest, warm up your body with your soul power, and get in top shape. I need to chat with Master and Senior about something. Hanli headed down from the platform. He could already hear Luo Zi and Du Gubo's voices, the familiar sounds of their regular chess match. Guang Ling's chess skills were awful, but he loved playing against Du Gubo. It gave the poisoned Douluo, who'd been on a losing streak, a chance to reclaim his glory on the board. Seeing Hanli approach, Du Gubo greeted him casually. Hey, Shaoli, come watch me crush your master. Hanli smiled, non-committal. Senior, if Sister Yan's condition has peaked with the medicine, let's wrap things up. It's time to prepare for her martial spirit evolution. Reach the limit, huh? Okay, when do you want to start? Du Gubo asked, dropping his chess pieces. Tomorrow. Let Sister Yan rest today, and you can tell her this afternoon. As for what she'll evolve into, it's all luck. Hanli reiterated the plan. Sounds good, no problem. Du Gubo agreed happily, standing up. He glanced at Guang Ling, who was still pondering the game. I concede. That's my win. Gotta go see Yan Yan. He disappeared in a flash, leaving Guang Ling stunned. Guang Ling, furious, crushed the chess pieces to dust. He'd almost won, and his opponent just abandoned him. What the heck was that? Seeing his master's angry gaze turn to him, Hanli quickly changed the subject. Master, could you protect me while I absorb the dew of autumn insight? Fine, Guang Ling sighed, his anger subsiding. Improving his strength was the priority. Your usual spot, or here. Guang Ling gestured to a large flat rock. Right here's good. Hanli walked to the rock and sat cross-legged. He flipped his wrist, revealing a green herb. He looked at the dewdrops on the 3 snow-white leaves, each like morning dew, and without hesitation, dropped them into his eyes. The instant the drops touched his eyes, he felt an intense coolness that made him shiver, but the coolness quickly faded, replaced by a sensation of his eyes being bathed in warm water, incredibly comfortable. Subtle energy flowed, fusing with his eyes, slowly enhancing them. After what felt like an eternity, Hanli finally felt his eyes had absorbed all the energy. He snapped out of his trance. He opened his eyes, brighter than before. His right eye's eagle eye had begun to operate independently. One eye was black, the other red, with light seeming to flow within them. Everything was clearer now. He could see dust motes in the air, and it seemed he could see farther without even using eagle eye. He instinctively activated his eagle eyes. In the next second, he seemed to see through the mountain, the various elements in the air appearing as energy clusters. He closed his eyes, following his intuition. Sure enough, the surrounding view was still displayed in his mind, clearer and more complete than before. A hint of joy crossed his face. He opened his eyes and looked toward Guang Ling. Master, test my mental power. Sure thing. Come on, Guang Ling replied, eager to see the results. Then, Master, be careful. My soul bone is 3 times stronger now. His mental power condensed into an invisible sharp cone and attacked Guang Ling fiercely. Guang Ling, not taking any chances, erected a defensive barrier. Invisible ripples spread out and quickly disappeared. Hanli groaned, his brain feeling as if it had been struck with a hammer. He shook his head before standing up. Not bad. Your mental attack power is at the beginner level for a soul Douluo. But factoring in the soul bone bonus, your normal mental power is probably around that of an ordinary soul saint. Guang Ling judged fairly, a smile on his face. Soul saint. That's pretty good. Hanli wasn't disappointed. He smiled. Hey, you're never satisfied, are you? The biggest gap between Soul Saint and Soul Douluo isn't soul power, it's mental power. Plenty of people get their soul power to level 79, but their mental power can only grow naturally. They get stuck at Soul Saint and can't advance. As a Soul Master, reaching Soul Saint is rare. Plus, you're still young. Even if you do nothing, your mental power will grow naturally. By level 50, your mental power could reach Soul Douluo. Others can only dream of that. Guang Ling walked over and playfully flicked his forehead. "Why do you always hit my forehead?" Hanli complained, rubbing his forehead. "Better to beat my apprentice early. Maybe when you're in your 20s, I can't beat you. I'll collect some interest in advance." Guang Ling wrapped an arm around him and patted him, a cunning smile on his face. "By the way, your soul bones should have improved significantly, judging by what happened," Guang Ling asked, tilting his head. "Yeah, the growth of mental power has sped up the aging of the soul bones. I mentioned the mental attack, which is 3 times stronger. As for eagle eyes, the perspective ability is greatly enhanced, and elemental vision has also improved. As for seeing the flow of soul power, the increased mental power means it takes less effort. I can't break your soul power defense, but Soul Saint level shouldn't be a problem, though they'll notice it." "Below Soul Saint. Hee, easy kills." Hanli grinned sinisterly. "Kid, you're totally cheating in battle. If someone's mental power is weaker, one mental poke while releasing soul skills, and their soul power could go haywire on the spot. Plus, your mental attack can add elemental effects. With bad luck, the soul ring could explode." Guang Ling gasped. "Even if you don't play dirty, you can attack the weak points of their soul defense. Huge advantage." Guang Ling didn't want to imagine how soul masters of the same level would fare against Hanli as he grew stronger. "All thanks to your great teaching, right?" Hanli obediently massaged his master's shoulders, flattering him. "That's right." Guang Ling accepted the flattery without blushing. For a while, their laughter echoed through the basin. Chapter 82, Soul Evolution, a little abnormal. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The next morning, Hanli woke up from his training feeling refreshed, sensing his soul power still growing. He stepped out of the stone chamber, a smile on his face. Today was the day Duguyan's martial soul would evolve, and also the day they'd finally be leaving. After living in the wilderness for over 2 weeks, even with all the preparations, Hanli was itching to get back. He missed his comfortable bed and even the usual background noise. He quickly washed up, grabbed a bite to eat, and then headed to the top of the platform. Sure enough, he was the last one to arrive. The others were already there, trying to ease Duguyan's nerves. She looked a little on edge. "Morning, Master, Senior, Yen," Hanli said. "Morning. That old coot was too scared to wake you himself, so he dragged me out of bed. I've been up for almost an hour," Guang Ling grumbled. Hanli smiled, not responding, and turned to Duguyan. She met his gaze, and seeing his calm expression seemed to relax her a little. "Ready, Yen?" Hanli asked gently. "Yeah, let's do it. It'll make us both stronger, right? No point in overthinking it." Duguyan took a deep breath and stood. Once she committed, she was calm. "That's the spirit. You've got this." Hanli nodded, then held out a red Ganoderma lucidum with leaves, which he had picked earlier. "Here, just eat the whole thing." He pressed it into her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Okay." Duguyan looked at the Ganoderma lucidum, nodded to the others, walked to the open space, and sat down. After a moment, she put the Ganoderma lucidum in her mouth. The 9th-grade dragon Ganoderma wasn't large, and she quickly swallowed it down, then started circulating her soul power. Almost immediately, a blood-red flame erupted from her body, engulfing her completely. The potent medicinal power transformed into pure energy, boosting her soul power, and her aura noticeably intensified. "What's this?" Dugu looked at Duguyan worriedly, pacing back and forth. "Relax, Senior, it's normal. You and Master are both so advanced that the fairy grass can only help you so much. It's more about enhancing other aspects." Yan's a great soul master, so some strong reactions are expected. Don't forget how much bigger the fuss was when my martial soul evolved. Han Li rolled his eyes, conveniently forgetting his clothes were fine. Ha, just anxious, Douluo said, stopping and smiling sheepishly. Time ticked by. The blood-red flame surrounding Douluo didn't weaken, but a faint draconic power began to emanate from her. Senior, it's your turn. Send a little of your martial soul aura her way, try to trigger her martial soul instinct. After that, it's up to her whether she turns into a dragon or swallows one. It's all on her now. Han Li turned to Douluo, signaling him to step in. Originally, he would have done this himself, but since the last time he drained his aura, his recovery had been too fast. He couldn't even find any traces of weakness after a few days. He wasn't about to risk the yin-yang eyes of ice and fire again to help Douluo evolve. Fortunately, Douluo could do the job. Their martial souls were from the same source, so his effect wouldn't be any worse than Han Li's. Alright. Douluo's expression turned serious, and he instantly activated his martial soul possession. Carefully controlling his aura, he approached Douluo in the open space. As he drew near, Douluo seemed to sense his presence. A small green snake emerged from behind her, hissed, flicked its tongue, and then disappeared back into her body. Seeing this, Douluo immediately retracted his martial soul and sighed in relief. Okay, that's all we can do to help. The rest is up to Yen. As he finished speaking, the blood-red flame around Douluo started to flicker, and a flicker of pain crossed her face, causing Douluo to clench his fists. Another hour passed with the flame constantly wavering. Then, the blood-red flame around Douluo stopped for a moment, and a powerful surge of soul power erupted outwards from her. As the wave of energy dissipated, Douluo opened her eyes and stood up, testing her own strength. She smiled and waved at the others. I did it. Seeing she was awake, the three hurried over. Yen, how do you feel? What did your martial soul evolve into? Show Grandpa. Douluo was immediately at her side, checking her over and firing questions, eager to know what had changed. To put it simply, Douluo had changed a lot. Her short purple hair was now a dark red, like the blood flame that had surrounded her. Her eyes were still green, but not the emerald green they had been before. Now they were a lighter, almost pale green. Overall, the strange feeling had lessened slightly, and she had a more heroic air. Grandpa, you're asking too many questions at once. Which one should I answer? Douluo was still Douluo, and she immediately went into her spoiled granddaughter act with her grandfather. Okay, I won't ask anymore. Take your time, no rush. Douluo was definitely a grandpa who spoiled his granddaughter, and he was no longer in a hurry. He happily stroked his beard, or what little of it he had, and nodded at the changes in his granddaughter. Douluo composed herself and said slowly, I'm not sure if my spirit is a dragon or a snake, and the spirit possession seems different from before. As she spoke, she raised her right hand, and a mini energy snake appeared in her palm. Han Li and the others immediately noticed the change. Beast spirits usually appear in the form of possession, sometimes with beast-like characteristics, sometimes without. But now, Douluo's spirit appeared in her hand, still in energy form. Can you still do a normal possession? Han Li asked quickly. Yes. Hearing him, Douluo immediately dispersed the spirit in her right hand and performed a normal spirit possession. Chapter 83 Unlocking a New Mode, Mutated Soul Skills. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Martial Spirit Fusion. Douluo called out softly as the mini-energy snakes in her hands dissipated. As her soul ring glowed, she seemed to grow taller, her body taking on a more supple form. Her legs transformed into a serpent's tail, and a chilling glint appeared in her narrowed eyes. Instead of standing on the ground, she floated about a foot above it, a pair of dark red energy wings materializing behind her. Excellent, excellent! Douluo exclaimed, overjoyed. Even from this initial glimpse of his granddaughter's transformed state, he could tell it was far stronger than her previous jade phosphorus serpent form. Fascinating, Guang Ling commented, looking Douluo up and down with interest. He then turned to Douluo, your granddaughter's evolution seems a step above yours. How so? Douluo asked eagerly, unbothered by Guang Ling's subtle jab at his expense. Well, it's understandable you wouldn't know. You're a bit of a self-made case, aren't you? Guang Ling needled before continuing. According to the Soul Palace's records, when a spirit master undergoes spirit fusion, especially with a flying-type spirit, the wings appearing directly as pure energy, not through a spirit skill, indicates a high-quality spirit. It might even be edging into top-tier territory. Those whose arms transform into wings, or who sprout feathers, are generally either flawed or limited to mere flight with no combat capabilities. The fact that she can levitate immediately after spirit fusion suggests a superior spirit. It's got to be among the best of the best. In short, she hit the jackpot, Guang Ling concluded. So, she's directly in the top tier. Maybe even leading the pack. Douluo beamed, looking at his granddaughter floating nearby, while his own jade phosphorus serpent evolved into the jade phosphorus serpent queen, becoming a top-tier spirit. It had significant drawbacks. Now that he was a titled Douluo, the quality of his spirit was less of a concern, making him content. His main worry had always been Douluo's future. He feared she might not reach his level. Now, at least, she had a shot at becoming a titled Douluo, putting his mind at ease. While they talked, Hanli studied Douluo's transformed appearance. This was the first time he had seen her in her spirit-fused state. The last time they were at Tiando Royal Academy, they were only doing routine training and didn't reveal their spirits. He stared curiously at her lower body, now a serpent's tail, wondering about the underlying mechanics. The tail's color indicated a complete transformation of her spirit. Even the jade phosphorus serpent's unique green scales had shifted to match her hair's dark red hue. Thanks to his elemental control, he could clearly sense a strong fire attribute aura emanating from Douluo, unlike Douluo, whose soul power merely carried a trace of purification. As he intently watched her snake tail, Douluo blushed. She didn't break her spirit fusion, but floated closer to him, flicking the snake tail and letting it fall into his hand. Seeing the snake's tail in his hand, Hanli raised an eyebrow and instinctively stroked it. Douluo shuddered in mid-air at the touch, and looked at him with embarrassment before releasing her spirit fusion and landing on the ground. Hanli watched, stunned, as her serpent's tail reverted to legs, complete with those peculiar shoes. It was too much. Forget it, better to keep things PG in this fantasy world, Hanli thought suddenly. Abandoning any further exploration, the two titled Douluos finished talking and looked at them again. Hey, Sis Yen, try manifesting the energy spirit fusion again, Hanli said casually. Yes, Yen, give it a shot. Grandpa's never seen a beast spirit manifest like that, Douluo and Guang Ling urged, their curiosity piqued. Okay. Douluo nodded, wanting to try it again. Martial spirit fusion. She exclaimed once more. At this time, something was different. Douluo's physical appearance remained largely unchanged, except for a colder demeanor. Above her head, a dark red, snake-shaped energy phantom materialized. They all watched closely, realizing that the spirit no longer resembled a jade phosphorus serpent. The phantom was dark red, with a pair of wings flickering with sparks. The serpent's body was still there, but its head was different. It no longer possessed the triangular head of a snake but more closely resembled a dragon's head, without horns. Its eyes remained snake-like, and it occasionally flicked its tongue, giving it a spiritual air. While the phantom retained the chilling presence of a snake, its aura also carried some of the majesty of a dragon, making it hard to tell what it was. No wonder Douluo was unsure if her spirit was a snake or a dragon. Her fusion state resembles the incomplete spirit form a soul saint achieves after unlocking the true form of their spirit, Guang Ling said thoughtfully after observing it for a moment. As he spoke, he released a wisp of his aura, manifesting the silhouette of a bow behind him as a demonstration. Indeed, it does look similar. But Yen, can you use spirit skills in this state? Douluo asked. Yes. As Douluo finished speaking, the yellow soul ring above her head flashed. A concentrated energy beam, imbued with explosive fire and poison attributes, shot out from the snake-shaped phantom. The beam struck a boulder some distance away, instantly shattering it. Plants along the way caught fire, and where the rocks landed, the vegetation quickly turned black, completely devoid of life. Not bad, Guang Ling said, nonchalantly assessing the damage. For a century-old first spirit skill, it was certainly impressive. Yen, have your spirit skills changed too? And what about the poison? Douluo asked anxiously, less optimistic than Guang Ling after seeing the attack's effects. Well, after the spirit evolved, my spirit skills changed as well. The first one, the attack I just used, I call it lava beam. The lava beam shoots a line of fire energy from the mouth. It's a long-range attack with burning and poisonous effects. It uses very little soul power and penetrates well. It can also be fired continuously with no cooldown. As for the second skill, it's like an amplification skill. It increases the fire attribute's power by 30%, but it only lasts for half an hour with a 1-hour cooldown. Though Douluo said she was sorry, her expression betrayed her satisfaction with her evolved spirit skills. As for the poison, don't worry, Grandpa. My body is completely free of toxins now. This poison is more like a fire poison that comes with the spirit's attack. The main attribute of the spirit after evolution is fire, although, well, let's just say it's a snake. It still has poison glands, but unlike the jade phosphorus serpent, its main attack method is fire. Also, I've noticed that after the spirit evolved, it has a high resistance to poison. Even poison that enters my body can be assimilated and absorbed by the fire element. Best of all, I'm completely immune to any poison originating from my spirit or myself. It will never harm me. So, Grandpa, you don't have to worry about me being affected by poison anymore, Douluo said happily. Yen, this is wonderful. But remember this clearly, your new spirit has no horns or feet. It must be a snake. Right? Hearing that his granddaughter was no longer troubled by poison, Douluo relaxed. But his thoughts were also wandering. Yes, Grandpa, you're right. It's a snake. Douluo nodded in agreement. She thought a snake was better too. After all, she had been proud of her snake spirit for so many years, not to mention that her spirit fusion mode still resulted in a snake tail. Chapter 84 Flame-Winged Snake Spirit and the Performance Before Leaving. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Whether it's a snake or a dragon, you really need to rename your martial spirit. Jade phosphorus snake just doesn't cut it, Guang Ling said, interrupting their grandfather-grandson chat with a smile. You're right, they both agreed, nodding in unison. How about letting Shaoli come up with something? He's the reason my martial spirit evolved in the first place. What do you think, Grandpa? Douluo asked, glancing at Hanli, who was watching quietly. Douluo chuckled. Letting him pick the name. Well, okay, fine. I just hope you won't be disappointed. He was clearly remembering Hanli's previous naming efforts. Guang Ling bit back a grin. Asking Hanli for a name was definitely an interesting proposition. Douluo caught their expressions and seemed to understand, but waved it off. Shaoli, what do you think? What should we call my new martial spirit? How about Flame-Winged Spirit Snake or Flame-Winged Snake Spirit? Hanli, sensing their lack of faith in his naming abilities, ditched Tanshi immediately. He figured he'd go with something a little more conventional. Flame-Winged Spirit Snake. Flame-Winged Snake Spirit. Spirit Snake. Snake Spirit. Not bad, Douluo said, looking pleased. Yeah, sounds alright, Guang Ling and Douluo exchanged surprised glances. This was a far cry from Han Li's usual style. Alright then, Flame-Winged Snake Spirit it is, little guy, Douluo said, shrinking the martial spirit into her palm. She knew it wouldn't answer, but she still spoke to it happily, poking at it with her other hand. Oh, right, Sister Yen, you said that after the martial spirit evolved, you'd be immune to any poison that comes from you, right? Like, your martial spirit and you, both immune? Hanli asked, suddenly remembering something as he watched Douluo playing with her martial spirit. That's right, Douluo confirmed, tilting her head slightly. So, you're still planning on playing with poisons? Han Li asked the real question. Just a little, now that my martial spirit is poison-proof, Du Guyan replied cautiously, watching both her grandfather and Guang Ling. She expected them to object, but they both nodded, seemingly fine with it. Of course, they weren't all on the same page. Du Gubo, thinking of Han Li's Yoxiang Qilua immortal, figured Du Guyan would be following him anyway. He had taught her all about poisonous weeds, insects, and their uses since she was a kid. Now that she was immune to her own toxins, she could keep it as a hobby. It's risk-free. Du Guyan, influenced by Du Gubo from a young age, genuinely enjoyed working with poisons. It had scared her a bit after her grandfather's incident, but now that her martial spirit had evolved, it wasn't such a big deal. Later, when adding soul rings, she planned to prioritize fire attribute soul beasts, especially if they had some poison element since she was immune anyway. Han Li was just confirming her intentions. He was already planning to help her get the 8 spider lances. If Du Guyan quit using poison, he'd have to rethink whether to change who was getting it. After all, it was a growth-oriented external soul bone, and a waste without poison, but since Du Guyan was still planning to play with poison, it was all good. The 8 spider lances would override anything her martial spirit couldn't handle. Okay, now that that's settled, we should get going, Guang Ling said, sensing they were done. Yeah, it's time to leave. I'm starting to feel like a hermit, Han Li agreed, looking around. Then let's go. I'm tired of being stuck here. No one comes here anyway. I'll reinforce the poison array when I get back, just to be safe, Du Gubo urged, wanting to leave as soon as possible. He came here all the time to suppress his own toxicity. Now that he was finally rid of it, he wasn't keen to stay any longer. If Du Guyan's problem hadn't needed solving, he might have left the day he recovered. By the way, Yan Yan, you're already at level 30. Want me to take you to get your soul ring? You should be able to handle a 5,000-year one now, right? Du Gubo asked Du Guyan, then turned to Han Li for confirmation. Shouldn't be a problem. Han Li's test showed Du Guyan's physical limit was around 5,500 years. Let me think about what fire-type snakes near the Sunset Forest would be good for Yan Yan. Hearing the confirmation, Du Gubo was already mentally hunting for the perfect soul beast. Hold up, senior. If you trust me, maybe wait a little longer. Sister Yan's coming back to Wuhuan City with us, and I need to hit up the Star Do Forest for my 3rd soul ring too. He paused, then continued, sometimes, waiting a bit leads to something better. Fates like that. Han Li still had a smile on his face, but his demeanor shifted, and he resembled a fortune teller. Du Gubo and Du Guyan exchanged confused looks, then turned to Guang Ling, who looked unusually serious. Seeing their gazes, he nodded firmly. Guang Ling remembered the time Han Li threw books on the carriage to find the fairy grass, wearing a similar expression, although not as pronounced. This time, it might be another big score. Thinking of Han Li's strange luck, Guang Ling had an idea. Besides, after their talk, Guang Ling had secretly observed Han Li for days. He seemed normal, unaffected, and indistinguishable from his former self, so, the criminals and fallen soul masters Han Li wanted to absorb soul rings weren't related to Du Guyan, right? Maybe it was a secret. Guang Ling's mind worked quickly, connecting all the details and finding a plausible explanation. Alright, let's not rush into hunting souls. Let's go back first. We can chill in the city, Du Gubo said, licking his lips. He sensed something was off. Why were Han Li and Guang Ling acting strange? Okay, let's go, Han Li said, returning to normal and looking at them innocently. Only Du Guyan looked confused. Why did her grandpa and Guang Ling act weird after Shaoli said not to rush getting the soul ring? It was just Shaoli sounding like those fortune-telling scammers. When she did it, it wasn't a big deal. Chapter 85. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At noon, they finally emerged from Sunset Forest into an open plain. They paused, gazing back at the forest behind them and then at the endless plain ahead. They closed their eyes, tilted their faces to the sun, and breathed in the breeze. after a long moment, they opened their eyes, exchanged smiles. Finally, feels like I'm back in the real world. Duguyen spoke. She'd spent the least time in the Yin-Yang Eyes of Ice and Fire, but the experience had shaken her the most. Half a month felt like years. She went in as Duguyen, level 26, with a green phosphorus snake martial soul, and a poison problem. Her grandfather was aging and frail, possibly near death. She came out at level 30. The spirit ring she gained would let her level up even more. Her martial soul had transformed into the top-tier flame-winged snake spirit, and the poison was gone. Her grandfather hadn't just survived, he'd regained his youth and strength. Her life had been completely turned around in a short time, everything shifting in a positive direction, all because she'd met someone. Thinking this, she gazed at Hanli and smiled sweetly. Hanli noticed her look, glanced back, unsure what she was thinking, but smiled back anyway. This is my get-out-of-jail-free card. He didn't know what was going on, but smiling was always the right move. Duguyen visibly relaxed. At his reaction, her eyes crinkling with laughter, the two titled Douluo, of course, noticed the interaction but said nothing. They knew better than to meddle in kids' business. Alright, Shaoli, Yen, you made it through, time to celebrate. Dugubo paused, pulled out a pocket watch, and checked the time. If we head back to the city now, we'll be starving. You two, go gather the barbecue supplies. I spotted some good eats not far from here. You get everything ready, and Guang Ling and I will go catch it. He grabbed a bewildered Guang Ling by the arm and dragged him away. What kind of ingredient required two titled Douluos to acquire? Guang Ling started to protest, but seeing Dugubo frantically winking, he gave up and let himself be led. Grandpa and the other are acting really weird, don't you think? Watching them leave, Duguyen sidled up behind Hanli, wrapped her arms around his neck, and leaned against his back, saying it with a touch of familiarity. Hanli's lips curved slightly, but he didn't argue. Yeah, a little bit. Unlike Duguyen, his mental strength now rivaled a soul sage's, boosted by an external soul bone. He habitually scanned his surroundings, so he'd definitely noticed Dugubo's strange behavior. He suspected Dugubo was still reeling from his previous display in Guang Ling's reaction, and had gone to discuss it. After his conversation with his master, he'd realized that some things needed to be explained away to justify his foresight. The secret mentioned by Guang Ling could be used as an excuse, which he would express in subtle ways. That was why he'd played the charlatan act so obviously when they left the Yin-Yang Eyes of Ice and Fire. Of course, he'd also made it obvious because the two people present, besides Guang Ling, had sworn the martial soul oath. These two would be around him in the future, and he couldn't always be searching for excuses. Better to turn the secret into a specific action. The Douluo Continent was full of weirdness, and he was just another piece of it. Once they arrived at the Star Do Great Forest and witnessed the power of the secret, they would no longer doubt its value. By the time he and Duguyen had almost finished preparing the food, the two returned with a bird. Guang Ling was as he had been. He just nodded to Hanli, indicating that the problem was not big and he had helped to solve it. Dugubo kept looking at Hanli like he was some rare zoo animal. Though his gaze was more relaxed now, less surprised. The meal itself was not great. Eventually, Hanli pulled out the rest of the ingredients from his wristband to finish it off. Dugubo hadn't put much effort in. The bird he'd caught was tiny, and the meat was dry. Duguyen complained, swearing she'd never trust his food recommendations again. After eating, the four started the journey back to Tiando City. Guang Ling and Hanli didn't want to attract attention, so they parted ways outside the city. Dugubo gave Hanli his address and a token, telling him to reach out when he could. Then, he grabbed Duguyen, who was about to say something, and headed into the city. Okay, let's head back to Spirit Hall. You can go rest. I'll go ask Sarath about the Blue Shadow Divine Eagle, see how far along he is with preparations. If possible, I'll have him send them ahead. Seeing that the grandfather and grandson had disappeared, Guang Ling and Hanli disguised themselves and entered the city. Okay, thank you, master. Hanli didn't refuse. He just wanted to take a bath, dive into his soft bed, and sleep soundly. Oh, and Dugubo asked about you, so I told him a little bit. Don't worry about it. Guang Ling said, tilting his head. Whatever you say. Han Li waved his hand dismissively. Guang Ling smiled at Han Li's sleepiness and quickened his pace. Back at the spirit hall, Han Li said goodbye to his master and went straight to his room. He took a long, hot bath, sent the maid away with instructions not to disturb him, then collapsed on the bed and fell asleep instantly. The next day, Han Li missed morning exercises for the first time in ages. His stomach rumbled him awake around noon. After washing and eating, he finally felt alive again. He rested for a while, then headed to Guang Ling's room. He knocked, got a response, then opened the door and walked in. Guang Ling was reading information. He nodded when Han Li entered, but continued reading. He pushed the information to Han Li, waiting until he had read it completely. Take a look. We've narrowed down the Blue Shadow Divine Eagle's location. Also, I found the soul beast that girl needs too. It won't be too hard to find. Oh, and here's some info about the man-faced demon spider you mentioned. It was already on record. You can read the details yourself. As for what you asked me to prepare, they left this morning. I selected 3 people, 2 soul lords and 1 soul grandmaster, per your request. People like that are hard to come by. Most of them get killed. You're lucky to have 3 still breathing. Guang Ling explained briefly. Chapter 86, Guang Ling's heart-throb history accidentally exposed. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Thanks, Master. Han Li held the information out to Guang Ling. Alright, wipe that smile off your face before I'm tempted to smack it off. Guang Ling shuddered dramatically, feigning disgust. So, when are you heading to Star Do Forest? Han Li, still absorbed in the info, replied without looking up, in the next couple of days. I'll swing by Sister Yan's place later to finalize the timing. Sister Huanyan, huh? Getting pretty cozy there. Wait till Xiao hears about this. You'll be running back to me and your uncle crying about it. Guang Ling teased. Nah, that won't happen. Don't sweat it. If you've got so much free time, why not find yourself a master wife? Lingyuan Douluo from the Elder Hall is a good catch, and younger than you. Word is, he's got admirers lining up, but with your looks and skills, you're still in the running. If you can snag him, I'll give you that coxcomb phoenix sunflower as a wedding gift. Maybe you'll end up marrying a phoenix Douluo and give me a junior apprentice, a power couple of ice and fire, following in my footsteps. I could even lend a hand. In a few decades, one of the 4 great Douluo sects will be booming, making waves across the whole continent. What do you say? Han Li, having finished reading, looked up and shot his master a playful grin. It was just a throwaway line, but Han Li caught a flicker of something in Guang Ling's expression. Bingo, something's up. Han Li was enjoying this way too much. After a pause, Guang Ling snapped out of her thoughts and noticed her apprentice was staring, analyzing her reaction. A blush crept up her neck. She slammed her hand on the table and pointed towards the door. Get out, you little devil. You're enjoying my misery. Go on, find your little snake girl. Just let me know when you've set a date. I'm swamped these days, so don't bother me unless it's important. Han Li was practically bursting with laughter inside but kept a straight face. Seeing his master's annoyance, he jumped up and made a beeline for the door. As he slipped out, he stuck his head back in. Don't be embarrassed, master. I'll hold on to that coxcomb phoenix sunflower for you. Just say the word, and I'll have it to you ASAP. Wham! A book slammed against the door as it closed. Han Li, sensing danger, was already long gone. Guang Ling stared at the closed door, chuckled softly, and shook her head. She picked up the book but couldn't shake the feeling Han Li's words had stirred up. Outside the spirit hall, Han Li, having turned down Rosego's offer to tag along, strolled through the streets of Tiando Imperial City, feeling on top of the world. This was, after all, the first time he'd gotten one over on Guang Ling since becoming her apprentice, and actually made it out alive. Once he was safely away, it hit him. It wasn't just his words that had gotten to her. Judging by Guang Ling's reaction, she'd been harboring evil thoughts for a while, but something had been holding her back. It took his casual comment to finally trigger that reaction. Otherwise, she would have chased him down and given him a beating. And he knew full well that he couldn't have successfully escaped from Guang Ling's clutches. Oh well, deal with it later. A title Douluo's got time on their hands anyway. Shaking off the thoughts, he got his bearings and headed towards the Douluo residence. After a polite knock, Hanli handed over the token Douluo had given him and was promptly ushered inside by a respectful servant. In the front yard living room, sipping the hot tea the servant had brought, Hanli learned that Douluo had gone out that morning. He nodded, asked them to fetch Douluo, and idly surveyed the yard. Nothing to write home about. It was just a plain old mansion. And because Douluo's family was so small, there weren't even many servants around. Before long, maybe 3 minutes, a girl in a light green dress came running from the back, a burst of fragrance accompanying her as she threw herself onto him. "What are you doing here so early?" Douluo was taller than Hanli now, but she acted like a little kid, clinging to him. "Early? It's already afternoon," Hanli chuckled. "I don't care, it's still early." Douluo butted her head against him playfully. "Okay, so it's early. Should I just come back tomorrow?" Hanli made to get up, but Douluo pulled him back down and into his seat. All right, get off me. Your grandpa might be back any minute. If he sees you like this, he'll beat me black and blue." Hanli gently pushed Douluo off him. "Humph, don't think I don't know." Guang Ling spilled the beans. "He took the initiative to set us up as a fiancé, and he hasn't even bothered to ask for my input." Douluo retorted, but she did get up and sit in a chair nearby. Hanli grinned sheepishly, not knowing what to say. It was a tricky question to answer. Seeing his discomfort, Douluo rolled her eyes but let the topic drop. "Speaking of which, did Grandpa mention what he was up to when he left?" Hanli took a sip of tea before looking at Douluo. "Nope, he just told the servants and left. I didn't know anything until I woke up." Douluo twirled a strand of hair around her finger, replying casually. "Did he say when we're leaving to get the spirit ring?" Hanli asked, admiring her pose. "He said it's up to you. He's just tagging along to the Star Do Forest and then heading back to Qindo City." Douluo paused, as if struck by a sudden thought. She let go of her hair, leaned across the table between them, and lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Shaoli, is everything Grandpa said true? That you're super lucky, and you can sometimes predict things that will help you and those close to you?" "Well, something like that. But I don't control it." Hanli raised an eyebrow. So, the old man had been talking. "So, you were having a prophecy that day when you were speaking mysteriously?" Douluo whispered, unable to hide her excitement. "Mysterious?" Hanli couldn't help but cringe. What a weird way to put it. He'd been putting on an act. Whatever, don't argue with them. They wouldn't understand the cosmic vibes. Huh? What then? Hanli looked at Miss Douluo, curious to see what was on her mind. Chapter 87, Daily Life with a Sudden Change in Style and Heading to the Stars. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Then, Hanli noticed Douluo, usually so cool, suddenly blushing and acting shy. After a long pause, she said, barely louder than a mosquito's buzz, "So, if you predicted something about me, that makes me yours too, someone close to you, right?" Hanli's face froze. This has gotta be the love continent. He was about to say it's a secret, but the vibe completely shifted. "Douluo, what happened to your usual self? Aren't you going to ask what I predicted? Why the shyness? Don't you know I prefer you how you were?" Douluo, you're disappointing me. Looks like you need some serious training, otherwise you'll lose your edge." Of course, that's what Hanli thought. What he said was a swift, absolutely. Sure enough, hearing that, Douluo's face lit up, and she was back to normal. She winked at him, then lazily slumped back into her seat. Now Hanli was thrown for a loop. He thought for a moment, then turned and asked, "Hey Yen, aren't you curious about what I predicted?" Douluo Yen just gave him a sweet smile and a cloying response. "Nah, no need. You wouldn't hurt me, would you, little brother?" She drew out the last few words, accentuating her figure and adding a touch of flirtation to maximize her appeal, and just like that, Hanli was hooked, feeling all warm and fuzzy. He finally understood the power of the love continent. Okay, so maybe the love continent wasn't so bad, as long as he was the one being loved. He quickly snapped back to reality, remembering why he was here. "Yen, since the senior told me to decide, let's go the day after tomorrow. Gives me time to restock on supplies." "Restock? Want some company?" Douluo Yen perked up. Her best friend was still at the academy, and she couldn't risk going there to see her right now, which left her stuck at home. "Sure, but maybe wear a veil. Even with your new look, your face is still recognizable. Don't want the royal family or the 7 treasures glazed sect spotting us while we're out." Hanli gestured towards her face. "Good call. Lingling just gave me a few veils, but I haven't tried them yet. I'll go change. And you're coming with me to buy clothes. My hair color changed, so a lot of my stuff doesn't look right anymore." "Yeah, and maybe get a size bigger. Gotta account for the changes after you absorb the soul ring. Forget makeup. Grandpa's got the good stuff. Thinking about it, if you hadn't reminded me today, I'd be scrambling tomorrow." Douluo Yen counted on her fingers, quickly planning her shopping spree. "Okay, go ahead. I actually need to buy some clothes too." Hanli realized his clothes, the ones Xior had gotten him, might be too tight after he absorbed the soul ring. "Then wait for me. Be right back." Douluo Yen, energized by the thought of shopping, called out and dashed to the back of the house, leaving him alone in the hall. Thankfully, Douluo Yen was quick. In under 5 minutes, she reappeared in a black dress and veil. "Alright, let's go." She smiled, grabbed Hanli's arm, and dragged him out. It wasn't until 8 that evening that Hanli stumbled back into the spirit hall. Even though he'd slept until noon, he looked exhausted, and a little down. He'd underestimated the sheer power of shopping with girls. He couldn't figure out how he, a soul master with the physical strength of a soul emperor, had been beaten by Douluo Yen in this regard. At least he'd been quick about it, not worrying about the cost. He just grabbed the expensive stuff. He went straight to a restaurant. After dinner, he firmly rejected Douluo Yen's suggestion to go shopping tomorrow, used the excuse of needing to train, agreed to meet outside the city the day after, took her home, and bolted. He thought to himself, "Master didn't seem to be around when I got back. Did he go see Qian Renxue again?" Probably. They're leaving soon. They need to say their goodbyes. They must be close. That's the only explanation for Master actively requesting the fairy grass. I wonder how the angel's martial spirit will change after taking the fairy grass. Will there be flame patterns on the wings? Hanli's thoughts started to wander, snapping out of it. Hanli shook his head. Forget it, no use overthinking. Time to train. He decided to focus. He still needed to make up for today's training. Now was not the time to slack off. The next day was uneventful. Guang Ling, honoring their agreement, didn't wait for Hanli to seek him out. He knocked on his apprentice's door early the next morning, asking if the time had been set. He acted perfectly normal, as if nothing had happened the previous day. After confirming the departure for tomorrow, he disappeared again, and Hanli stayed put, spending an ordinary day. Early on the 3rd day, before dawn, the long unseen luxury car quietly left Tiando City, picking up 2 figures outside the city. They climbed into the car, and took off towards the Star Doe forest. Inside the carriage, Douluo Bo reclined in a comfortable rocking chair, looking sideways at Hanli. "You two are really living the high life. So that's why you said we didn't need to bring a carriage. Turns out you have this handy-dandy travel tool. Senior, I can have one delivered to your place later, if you'd like. They're not that valuable. If you don't leave Tiando, you'll probably see these things all over the place in a month or so anyway." Hanli casually opened a bottle of fresh juice and handed it to Douluo Yen, without turning around. "Alright, then I won't say no." Douluo Bo leaned back, and the rocking chair started to gently rock on its own. He closed his eyes contentedly, and didn't speak, seeming to enjoy the rare comfort. How long until we get to the Star Do forest? Dugu Yen took a sip of the juice, savoring the sweetness and fragrance of the fruit, then turned to ask. Her first 2 soul rings had been obtained in the Sunset Forest. She'd never been to the Star Do forest and was curious. About half a month. Han Li replied, recalling the trip. So, it'll be at least a month before we get to Wuhuan City? Dugu Yen muttered, sounding thoughtful. Something wrong? Han Li closed his book, turned and noticed her emotional change. Nothing. Just didn't realize my first long-distance trip would take a month just to get there. Dugu Yen smiled, trying to reassure him. What else could she do? She was just eager to see where he lived. Chapter 88. Your hostages are in place, enter. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Maybe it was because we'd been down this road before, but we made much better time this trip. Thanks to Rosego's improved driving, we reached the edge of the Star Forest in just 11 days. Stepping back into the bustling town, I got the same stares as last time. After all, fancy, unusual carriages like ours are rare, and it hadn't been that long since we were here. The locals have good memories and sharp eyes. They steer clear as soon as they spot our ride, just like before. Rosego had free rein, and the 4 of us arrived at the Spirit Hall station. Guang Ling wasted no time. He strode to the gate, flashed his elder's token, and we were ushered in with the utmost respect. Did Salas send the person I requested? Guang Ling asked, cutting right to the chase. Yes, sir. They arrived this morning and are under guard. Shall I take you to them now? The leader of the station replied, head bowed, not daring to meet our eyes. He didn't want to know anything, didn't dare to know. He just wanted us to take those 3 away and be done with it. Excellent. Take us there. Guang Ling was pleased with the response. Right this way, please. The deacon breathed a sigh of relief and immediately led the way. He stopped at a completely sealed stone room. Sir, they're inside. Here's the key. My security clearance isn't high enough to go any further, so I'll have to ask you to go in alone. Understood. Hand it over. Guang Ling knew the drill, took the key, and waved him off. Then, he turned to us. All right, let's go in together. This is. Dugu Bo and Dugu Yen were confused, wondering who Guang Ling was taking us to see. Just 3 criminals and a disgraced spirit master. Don't worry about it. I don't know what they're good for. This was Xiao Li's idea. Guang Ling gestured to Han Li, who hadn't said a word since we arrived. I have a feeling it's best to bring them with us into the forest this time. They might come in handy. Han Li shrugged, palms open. Hey, I just work here. Okay, don't overthink it. Just bring them along. We'll figure it out. It's only 3 people, it won't slow us down. Guang Ling glanced at Dugu Bo, signaling him to follow. Fine. Dugu Bo looked at the 2 younger ones and took the lead. He wasn't about to rely on them to lead the way. Han Li and Dugu Yen stayed outside. Bringing along random people can help us get the spirit ring? Dugu Yen looked puzzled. She couldn't imagine what difference it would make. We weren't going to use them as human shields when we ran into spirit beasts. Not with 2 title Douluo along for the ride. And she knew that Light Ling Douluo was level 98 now. Even if a legendary 100,000-year spirit beast showed up, we wouldn't need bait to make our escape. Who knows? Han Li didn't answer. If everything went according to plan, she'd find out soon enough. Why spoil the surprise? Moments later, Guang Ling and Dugu Bo emerged, each carrying a person. Han Li and Dugu Yen saw that their soul power was sealed, and their mouths were gagged. They couldn't even struggle. Sensing danger, they glared at us with fierce eyes. Han Li and Dugu Yen were certain that if they were freed, they'd attack without hesitation. Too bad for them, we didn't care. Han Li aside, Dugu Yen had always been taught not to seek out trouble, but to be ruthless when confronting evildoers. Besides, she'd heard Guang Ling say these were criminals and disgraced spirit masters. She glared right back, ready to kill them if they gave her any lip. The three of them finally calmed down for the moment. The spirit hall has some talent. Whipping up some simple potion that regularly incapacitates spirit masters below the spirit king level. I'd like to meet the guy. Douluo tossed his burden and said with interest. Guang Ling and Hanli exchanged knowing glances. What's wrong? Did I say something wrong? Douluo frowned, confused by their expressions. Senior, you might know him. Remember Douluo? He's in charge of punishments in the spirit hall. This potion is one of his inventions. Hanli stifled a laugh. Douluo's hand froze, and the person he was holding landed face first on the uneven ground with a groan. I forgot. Never mind. This potion is nothing special. Give me some time, and I could come up with something better. Douluo bent down, picked up the person, and marched toward the exit. Let's go, let's go. The spirit beast won't wait for us. Let's get there early and avoid the crowds. The three of us suppressed our laughter, looked at each other, and hurried after him. At the edge of the star forest, Hanli and Douluo walked through the town and into the forest. After walking for a while, we saw the two elders waiting for us. It's just, too many people saw the spirit hall emblem on the carriage when we arrived. While we could have brazenly paraded through the town with prisoners, it was better to avoid the attention. So Guang Ling and Douluo chose to fly in ahead of us. Okay, Shaoli, same as always. Your strength has improved, and you know the intel. You and Douluo decide how we proceed. Douluo and I are just here for your safety. Guang Ling was as direct as ever. No problem, master. Hanli agreed. He was strong enough to survive even in the danger zones, and he needed real combat experience. Even if Guang Ling hadn't said anything, he would have used this opportunity to train. Alright, let's go. Guang Ling glanced at Douluo, and they vanished with their hostages. Chapter 89 Night Attack, a battle that is about to break out. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Alright, Yen, let's do this thing. Hanli glanced back at Douluo, who'd been buzzing with excitement ever since they entered the forest. Let's go. Perfect timing. I want to see how much stronger I am after my spirit evolved. Before, my spirit skills were mostly support. Even in fights, I had to rely on the poison from my spirit to slowly wear down opponents. Now, I can actually go on the offensive. As Douluo spoke, the image of her spirit appeared behind her, wings unfurling. The flame-winged snake spirit hissed, flicking its tongue, clearly eager for a fight. Okay, until we reach the mixed zone, I'm counting on you for protection. Hanli raised his twin swords, their luster completely gone, and pretended to sheath them. No problem. Just stick close. Douluo winked at him and took the lead, heading deeper into the forest. Hanli smiled and followed, and together they ventured further in. After a while, Hanli, who constantly scanned their surroundings, started to feel tired. Douluo's field combat skills were less than ideal, according to Hanli's teacher. After just an hour, Hanli was already exasperated following her, relying on her spirit's evolved strength. She was a powerhouse in this outer area. Plus, her first spirit skill after the mutation activated faster. She was practically decimating every caterpillar they came across. Burned to a crisp, while she wasn't directly killing these weak spirit beasts, abiding by the unspoken rules between spirit masters, at least 8 or 10 low-level beasts were limping with injured legs and stomachs. The air reeked of burning and blood. Okay, Yen, hold up. If you keep this up, we'll be swarmed by spirit beasts when we hit the mixed zone. Hanli quickly stopped her. Oops, okay, I'll stop. I got a little carried away. Her excitement deflated, and she realized what she'd been doing, stopping with a sheepish look. Okay, let's move on. Your spirit has good vision. For now, you're on alert. If any weak spirit beasts show up, scare them off. We need to pick up the pace. Han Li glanced at the sky. If they hurried, they could still reach his old campsite, saving them a lot of trouble. Got it. After calming down, Dugu Yan got her act together, recalling the wilderness survival skills she'd learned, and they started moving faster. On the way, after entering the mixed zone, they faced 2 more attacks. This time, thanks to Han Li's early warning and Dugu Yan's focus, the battles were over quickly. After her spirit evolved, the fire element connected to Dugu Yan's spirit was powerful. Plus, her first spirit skill was fast and continuous. Without Han Li's help, she displayed impressive combat abilities. A shadow leopard around 1,300 years old and a dark crow around 1,800 years old were caught off guard. They were immediately crippled, their mobility gone, and subsequently blasted by continuous lava beams. Dugu Yan hardly broke a sweat defeating the 2 spirit beasts, realizing the difference between her old self and her current self. So far, she had only used her first spirit skill. Not bad, but they're still too weak. They don't prove anything, and don't really challenge you. Han Li poured a bucket of cold water on her, worried she'd revert to her earlier state. I know, you don't have to remind me. Dugu Yan shot him a look. On the way, she had overheard Guang Ling talking about Han Li's accomplishments. When he had just reached level 20 and had not yet obtained the spirit ring, he could handle 2 over 2,000-year-old spirit beasts on his own. She was already at level 30 now, and just beating a 1,500-year-old spirit beast was nothing. A month ago, she might have been bragging about it, hoping the entire Tiando Royal Academy would publicize her achievements, but now, she just wanted to be stronger to keep up with Han Li. Even now, she had never seen Han Li fight for real, but just the aura that leaked out when he summoned his spirit suppressing her own, and the black 10,000-year-old ring were enough to show his power, not to mention, except for hearing that sword Douluo could fly with a sword, she had never seen any weapon spirit master who could create his own flying spirit skill before reaching the 3rd level. She doesn't know if sword Douluo's flying ability is a spirit skill. In the mainland, spirit masters' abilities are kept secret. Moreover, after obtaining the spirit ring this time, she would definitely be able to see Han Li take action, and she was looking forward to it. Looking at Dugu Yan, who seemed lost in thought after their exchange, Han Li waved his hand in front of her eyes and looked at the darkening sky. Okay, come on. We'll need to clean up the camp a bit before we can use it. He adjusted their course slightly, leading Dugu Yan toward the last campsite. The campsite wasn't too far. He estimated it was less than a 10-minute walk. The forest grew darker faster than the outside world, of course, that was also because of the dense trees. They'd only been walking for 3 minutes, and the darkness seemed to have deepened. Because of the spirit possession and Dugu Yan's weak mental power, she couldn't completely suppress the light. In this environment, she was like a moving light bulb, very conspicuous. Yan, why don't you put away your spirit for now? At night, more powerful predators roam the forest. Let's get to the camp first to avoid any trouble. Han Li, who was used to hiding himself, wasn't thrilled by this treatment. He turned to look at Dugu Yan. Okay. Dugu Yan nodded. It wasn't just Han Li. After walking for a while, she had also realized something was off. Her current state was basically begging for trouble, but without her spirit's help, her night vision wasn't great. Still, since Han Li suggested it, she put her spirit away. Yan, hold on. Your opponent is here. Take care of it, and I'll cover you. Han Li suddenly pointed ahead. Dugu Yan's expression turned serious. She entered combat mode, eyes fixed on the darkness. Her mental power wasn't as strong as Han Li's. Maybe the evolution of her spirit had improved it somewhat, but it was only slightly above average and nowhere near enough for long-range warning. Just as she went on high alert, Han Li vanished, hiding behind a tree. This was a fight she needed to face, and he was only there to make sure she was safe. Chapter 90: The Strange Human-Faced Demonic Spider. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Suddenly, a weird sound cut through the darkness. Instantly, Dugu Yan's first soul ring flared to life, and a dark red energy beam shot out, blasting toward the noise. The explosion lit up the surrounding trees. Dugu Yan scanned the area, but saw nothing. Her attack had missed. the thought barely crossed her mind when she heard a rustling to her left, louder than before, a snake. Or some kind of bug. Her knowledge finally kicked in, she bolted toward where she'd just attacked and fired another lava beam at the general location of the sound on the left. Since she couldn't identify the soul beast, the only safe place was where she'd already attacked. Staying put would be the worst decision. Another blast lit up the trees, but Duguyen still didn't spot her enemy. It was fast, that much she knew after 2 attacks. Time to burn everything. That way, anything trying to get to her would have to brave the flames, and it would improve her visibility, helping her pinpoint the enemy. No sooner had she thought it than she did it. Lava beams blazed around her, and she finally saw it. A huge spider skulked around the edge of the fire, searching for a way in. The growing light revealed a shiny, black shell. This was no ordinary spider, it was enormous, its body over 5 feet across, with 8 spear-like legs each reaching over 10 feet. A spider, huh? Hard to say what kind, but most spiders rely on poison and webs, and they're weak against fire. This was her turf. Duguyen's confidence surged. Time to identify it, find its weaknesses, and react accordingly. She activated her first soul ring again, blasting the spider with dark red beams, driving it around the perimeter. Hanli, watching from the shadows, nodded. So far, so good. Textbook strategy, safe, and likely to win. Maybe it was tempting fate, but the moment he thought that, everything changed. Maybe Duguyen's constant attacks, and the hated flames, finally got to it. The spider skidded to a halt. It took a direct hit, flames licking its body, and then, using all its strength, it launched itself into the center of the fire. It jumped. The crazy move shocked Hanli, and even Duguyen paused mid-attack, but she recovered quickly. No matter what kind of spider it was, the soft abdomen was always a weakness. She couldn't pass up an opportunity like this. She aimed at the falling spider, firing everything she had. Her first and second soul rings flared, and a thick, dark red beam shot at the airborne target. Now she recognized it. A man-faced demon spider. White lines on its abdomen stood out against its black body, forming a grotesque human face. 8 small eyes, glowing with purple light, glared down at Duguyen from midair. Burning with rage, seeing her fire more flames, the spider tensed its abdomen. A massive white web, coated in a blue-purple liquid, shot out, colliding with the dark red beam in midair. The impact caused a violent explosion. Burning web fragments rained down. Duguyen frowned. Blood-red flames erupted around her, incinerating the falling debris. The reaction cost her the perfect opportunity to attack. With a crash, the flaming man-faced demon spider landed, kicking up dust. For some reason, it seemed to hate Duguyen with a passion. Ignoring the flames, it reared up and spat another poisoned web. Duguyen had no time to dodge. Surrounded by her fiery aura, she braced for impact and unleashed her own soul skills. The spider, meanwhile, danced in a crazy S-pattern, dodging Duguyen's attacks as it closed the distance. Realizing the spider didn't care about self-preservation, Duguyen sighed and used her wings to lift off the ground, but the man-faced demon spider refused to give up. After firing its last web, it ignored the flames and continued to leap, trying to reach Duguyen in the air. This bizarre behavior, combined with the raging flames, created a strange sight in the Soul Beast Forest. Hanli and the 2 title holders floated into the air, joining Duguyen, their faces a mix of confusion and concern. They stared in silence at the red-hot spider below, still jumping like a crazed flea, at a loss for words.